All right, Mark Rogers TV talking some Florida State football. We bring in David Visser from Tomahawk Nation. It's the SB Nation platform for Florida State athletics. David, first time on with us here. We appreciate it. How you doing?
Doing great, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. So Florida State primed in most people's eyes for a ACC in the national championship run. Any areas of concern, positional battles that we can look out for in August camp?
Of course. And naturally, I think, as it usually does, it starts up front, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. This is kind of an odd patchwork offensive line right now. Jimbo Fisher's been quoted as saying, I believe at ACC Media Days, that, well, 4 of the 5 guys have started games. That's true, but they've kind of been around the line in different places. They've had a couple starts here and there. And, of course, all they have to do is open up against Alabama. So this is going to be really interesting. The one guy who doesn't have a start is Josh Ball, who we're expecting to start, of all places, at left tackle. So this is just going to be really interesting. Rick Trickett, the offensive line coach, is famous for bringing in sometimes unheralded yet super talented guys. So it'll be interesting to see just how far he's been able to bring them along when they get Alabama, and then they get Louisiana Monroe after that, and then it's Miami and NC State, 2 of the more talented defensive lines in the country. So I think that's where it really starts. And that's all about keeping DeAndre Francois upright. I can't believe how many times that guy got up last year. He really had no business with the punishment he was taking. And they really need him again this year, because behind him, yikes, you got a true freshman in Bailey Hockman. And then you got J.J. Cosentino, who's been there for what seems like a decade and has just never really shown the knack to be able to step in and play D1 quarterback. So keeping Francois healthy this year is actually more important than it was last year when they had Sean McGuire there.
So the team's loaded, and when you look at recruiting rankings, Florida State ranks right up there with the other couple schools that we would name each and every year: Alabama, Ohio State, etc. Roderick Johnson's gone. You mentioned Ball, who comes in as a top 20 recruited offensive tackle out of Virginia. The left side's pretty much wiped out. So what is it with offensive line? That's been the bugaboo the last few years for this Seminoles program.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not that they haven't brought up some good guys. Cam Urban was a first-round draft pick to Cleveland. Rod slid, I think, a little farther than most people thought. He didn't have a great season last year and really could have stood to have come back. They just injuries. That's been one thing. I think that they tend to get ahead of themselves a lot. Fisher runs a complex offense, a complex pro-style offense, and a lot is made of that often. And it's specifically usually put on the receivers with regard to why young receivers don't hit the field earlier. But I think that sometimes the young offensive linemen tend to try to overthink a little bit too much. You see a lot of false start penalties from this group, and it's routinely attributed to those guys basically trying to get started too quickly because they've got so much going on in their heads.
Yeah, you mentioned Francois. I think what he turned in last year was one of the more remarkable seasons out of a freshman that you could imagine, because of what you just mentioned. He was constantly coming off the deck, getting hit in the mouth. And so throw out the stats. They're not bad, but they're not as remarkable as the performance was on the field. So if he can have a clean pocket like half the time, that's going to feel like a luxury to him. So I think he's the best quarterback in the conference. And even though the Heisman Trophy went to someone else, deservedly, but I think he's the best quarterback all around because of what he can do with his arm. Elsewhere, no Dalvin Cook. Obviously, the running back situation is loaded, but up for grabs. Take us wherever you'd like in regards to what you're going to keep your eye on in August.
Well, let's start right there with the running back position. This is kind of weird, too, because you're right. Dalvin Cook Dunn, he's the greatest running back in program history. All due respect to Warwick Dunn, who was phenomenal, but Cook was just on a different level. That said, FSU is extremely well set at running back, and that's really strange to say. Jacques Patrick returns. This is a big guy. This is a bruiser. Fisher has repeatedly exhorted him to run lower, run behind his pads, run like a big guy. He finally did that last year against South Florida, had a huge breakout game. I think he had 3 touchdowns. At one point, he actually pointed a guy out as he was about to hit him while he was running with the football, which, I mean, that's like video game stuff, right? And then after that, he proceeded to find the bench again. So it was strange. I mean, we all wrote about that, like the emergence of Jacques Patrick. Here he comes. It's hard to see, like, did Fisher just say, hey, look, I've got Dalvin Cook, I'm going to give him as many carries as I can, or was he still not happy with Patrick? So we'll see how that works out. On the other hand, FSU brings in a running back class that features Cam Akers, the #1 running back recruit in the country, Kalon Laybourne, the #1 all-purpose back in the country, and Zaquandre Wright, a burner from South Florida. So this is a ridiculous class, and a lot of people, myself included, think that while Patrick may get the start against Alabama, it won't be long before you see Cam Akers, specifically because if Fisher is looking to take heat off his quarterback, you can go to a home run hitting running back. That's what he had in Cook, and that's really what Akers is as well.
As you know, when you get the national perspective, they tend to look at one guy, and so Cam Akers has led the narrative at the running back position to replace Dalvin Cook, but it's more complex than that because you mentioned these other guys that are coming in that are exceptional. Amir Rasul's another name, and there's some other guys in the program. Of course, Ryan Green has been a veteran on campus for a while. So it's almost up to Jimbo Fisher to mix and match and look for the best spots because there's not going to be a Dalvin Cook, I don't think, in this backfield unless I'm wrong. There's going to be situational type play for each one of these guys.
I think so. And one of the things that people tend to forget too, and this will bring us back to keeping Francois upright, who's doing the best job with regard to picking up pass protection and blitzes? It's not the sexiest part of running back, right? Everyone wants to see those 80-yard runs, but it's massively important.
Definitely.
And also, if we're talking about the running game, another thing to look for too, and this could actually keep Francois in better shape, is if Fisher goes ahead and runs Francois a little bit more. It's counterintuitive. You think he's going to be out there running around with Alabama linebackers, but that creates leverage for FSU as far as who Alabama has to account for and how many guys they can bring with their ears just pinned back.
No doubt about that. We're all looking forward to that matchup in particular when those two Titans get together in week 1. Anything else along the offensive side? I know wide receiver, tight end are a bit up in the mix. Kermit Whitfield and Travis Rudolph take like 89 catches with them to the pros. Are you looking out for those positions as well?
Yeah, wide receiver, again, there's talent there. There's a lot of unproven talent. Leading the way, you've got Nooney Murray and Auden Tate. Tate's the big guy. I think he goes 6'4". Nooney's small, but electric. He can make someone miss in a phone booth. Most people saw him break out. He had the 2-touchdown game against Michigan in the Orange Bowl, just torched Jordan Lewis. The problem with Nooney is that sometimes he shows up and sometimes he doesn't. If he doesn't think he's getting the ball, maybe he doesn't run the best route. Fisher, that doesn't work with Fisher. It's almost like an ego thing, I think, with Jimbo, where he's like, I don't care. I'll play the next guy even if he's not as good. Tate, again, you can throw jump balls to Tate, but Fisher likes his offense complex. He wants guys to be able to make safety reads and adjust on the fly and see the same thing that the quarterback's seeing. It's almost like it's beneath him sometimes to just send a guy in a 9 route because he's huge and will out-athlete the other guy. So we'll see. Beyond that, George Campbell's a guy who's a 6'5" guy and ran a 4.4. He's become what FSU fans have taken to calling the new unicorn, as in he's this great mythical creature, but we're not sure if we'll ever see him. So can he stay healthy? Can he finally see the field? There's actually been talk of some people saying, like, would they bring Derwin James over to play wide receiver if it's an issue, because really the guy can play everything. Tight end, yeah, Ryan Izzo's your #1. He's been established there for a while. It's going to be interesting to see the #2 spot, though. Maven Saunders is a kid from the Bahamas who was also recruited as a basketball player. Super athletic, struggled early on in picking up the blocking schemes, but really showed a lot of progress over the year. But this is a guy who's kind of more in like the mold of an Eric Ebron from North Carolina, someone who can really get it and run guys over or hurdle them, frankly. I mean, so it'll be interesting to see how much we see of him because, again, all coming back to Francois on the offensive side of the ball. If you can maybe run like some 22 personnel, going 2 running backs and 2 tight ends, now you can really shorten up splits on the offensive line and really kind of pack it in there to help out Francois.
David Visser joins us from Tomahawk Nation, Florida State's platform on SB Nation, with the Noles and the Tide getting together in just about a month, and Florida State going to fall practice here in just a few days. So I checked out the article David, concerning what legendary feats could be in play if the Noles could do the unthinkable, and not because they don't have the talent to do it, but because of the challenges in front of them, and run the table, go 15-0, and what that means from a program history perspective. So we're not going to spoil it, but we would like to encourage some people to check out the article, because there's a lot of interesting fun facts in there of what Florida State is doing and trying to chase and surpass some of its rivals from a historical standpoint. And if Florida State's to do that, or even come close to that, maybe go 13-2 and win a national title, or 14-1, the defense is probably going to go down as one of the best in program history if they fulfill the potential there. I look at names all over the place on each level of the defense, and it's remarkable.
Yeah, and again, to start up front, man, this defensive line is super good and super experienced and really deep. A great trio there. You got Derek Nottie, the strongest guy on the team, and DeMarcus Christmas opening up at the tackle spots. Then you can bring in Walvenskiame, you can bring in Fred Jones. And, oh, yeah, there's this guy, Marvin Wilson, who's the #1 defensive tackle recruit in the country. Derwin James had a quote, I believe this was at ACC Media Days, where he said, "If y'all think I'm a freak, wait till you see this guy." And I've watched Derwin James run up from behind a grown man and jump over him. Not the leapfrog kind where you put your hand on a guy's shoulders, just spread his legs and clear him. This is what James is saying about this big guy. So we'll see. We'll see how often he gets in, but they're really good up there on the ends. They got Brian Burns, who is coming off a really nice freshman season, was way too lean. I've seen pictures of him in the weight room. He's put on some really good weight. On the other side, you got Josh Sweat, again, former #1 recruit in the country. Probably going to be a first rounder, I bet, if he leaves after this year, which he probably should. Jacob Pugh, a linebacker, looks like he's going to have a breakout season. They return both starting linebackers. So just through the front seven, absolutely. If there are concerns on offense, there's certainly not as many on defense.
All right, talking Florida State football with David Visser, Tomahawk Nation. You got to join him there for the best in Florida State football coverage, along with the rest of the staff there on the SB Nation platform. David, would be great to track you down sometime before the Alabama game. Appreciate the time, man.
Yeah, and I should say the only reason I didn't mention the secondary is because they're stacked and, of course, led by Derwin James. But thanks a lot, Mark.